this history, as with many histories, we'll start with the first known written text on the nature of light rays. Before that, it's just conjecture about how man may have seen light passing through a small opening, maybe in a cave or through the leaves of trees, and have seen the upside-down image of the real world projected on a wall or on the ground. But the first known writings on ideas that would eventually become the Camera Obscura are from around 400 BC by Mozi, a Chinese philosopher who correctly asserted that an image passing through a small opening is upside down because light rays travel in straight lines. A little later, or actually a little more recently, we also have writings from the ancient Greeks about observations on the behavior of light rays. There apparently was quite a bit of debate about whether the rays emanated from the eye or from the object itself. But by the 4th century BC, Aristotle wrote an observation on a solar eclipse as seen through tree leaves, creating a projection of the crescent shape of the eclipse on the ground. And by around 300 BC, in Euclid's writings on optics, he is credited with the first real definition on the nature of light rays. One of the other things Euclid is famous for is having written the definition of the golden ratio. The golden ratio and the rule of thirds are used as cropping templates in Adobe Photoshop, and we will look at how these are used later on in this class. This isn't a science course, so we won't go into the continued refinement on the theory of light over the centuries, although it includes Sir Isaac Newton and Einstein and many other famous scientists. Instead, the next important date for us is in the 9th century AD, when Alhazen wrote a detailed description and analysis of how light rays work. He is credited with having invented the camera obscura and the pinhole camera. The pinhole camera is the simplest camera possible to make, and as it exists today is a light-proof box or container of some sort, with a very tiny opening, a pinhole, on one end and a piece of light-sensitive paper on the other. Light is allowed to enter through the hole and is projected onto the paper. The paper is then developed in the darkroom, and you have a photograph. The strange quality of a pinhole camera photograph is mainly because no lens is used, and the aperture, or the opening, is really, really small. So now we have the camera obscura. At some point, a lens was incorporated, replacing the pinhole and creating a sharper projected image. By the 15th century, the camera obscura was widely used by artists as a means to sketch or really trace from nature. Among those known to have used the camera obscura are Da Vinci in the 15th century, Canaletto in the 16th century, and Vermeer in the 17th century. Notice in particular how photographic looking the Canaletto paintings are. So with the continued development of the camera obscura, we now have the camera lens and the body, just no way to capture the image except to trace it by hand. Okay, more science. In the 18th century, in 1727, Professor J. Schultz mixed chalk, nitric acid, and silver in a flask in an attempt to make a phosphorescent material, and was amazed to discover that the mixture turned dark violet in sunlight. The first photo, or light-sensitive compound, had accidentally been created. But apparently, he never applied the solutions to paper or made any attempt to record natural images. Besides science, another important ingredient in the development of photography is commerce. Actually, you could say there are 3 key areas that have pushed the development of photography forwards: science, commerce, and art. In 1795, Thomas Wedgwood, the youngest son of the famous potter Josiah Wedgwood of Wedgwood pottery, began experimenting with light-sensitive materials. Thomas was familiar with the camera obscura because his father used it as an aid in drawing detailed scenes for use on his pottery. The Wedgwood family also owned notebooks of William Lewis, who in 1763 had described Schultz's experiments with silver compounds. The young Thomas began experiments on his own probably around 1795. Thomas Wedgwood narrowly missed being the inventor of photography for 2 reasons. He gave up attempts to make pictures with the camera obscura. Apparently he did not allow enough time for the exposures, and whatever he did get to work would quickly turn black when exposed to stronger light. In 1816, Napes began experimenting with the combination of the Camera Obscura and a photosensitive paper, and 10 years later, in 1826, he created the first known permanent image. And so, in 1826, we arrive at the actual beginning of the camera and photography.